Okay, what I've done is I've come back and I've cleaned up the bottom, removed any of the excess 5-minute epoxy that was around the brass channel holes. I need to be able to know where I can place, where I will be placing the holes for the base and these brass rods to be inserted into. However, when we got this much distance between them, it isn't necessarily the easiest. I mean, I don't know for sure if this is going to align with the edges when it's this far away from the base. So what I'm going to do is I've made 2 inserts that barely, they're out of toothpicks, that barely protrude out of the bottom, and I can line up the head exactly the way that I'd like for it to be. And if I push down nice and hard, it leaves shiny spots on the top, and I've marked those with pencil. Oh, just this little bit of protrusion was enough and close enough for me to know that I'm right on with where I'm going to be inserting these pins. I know that I need to drill my holes at this length, and using my handy dandy ruler, I'm going to have to go in about 1 centimeter. So I'm going to take my drill and I've noted that there is a little bit of an angle difference on these. That's the play that I'm talking about is necessary so that I don't have to be as accurate. For me to have drilled these exactly correct would have been practically impossible. So if I make these holes a little bit bigger than they need to be, and I let the 5-minute epoxy make up the difference, I'll still have accurate placement of these pins so that that'll mate up with the channel on the head. So we're looking at about a 1/2 inch, a little bit over 1/2 inch. And again, I'm going to do some drilling. Checking to make sure I'm straight up and down. Check and see how far I've gone. See, I've got a little bit of play going on here. That's perfect. Do the same thing the other hole. Checking to make sure I'm going straight in, straight up and down. If I put these pins into the head the way they're supposed to be. Then I place them onto the base. You can see I've got a perfect fit. Now, there was some area in the front of the base that I hadn't totally matched up yet. Now that I know for sure where the pins place the head when they're actually in, I can make up my difference so that I have a nice flush setting and the head flows right into the base. It's already doing that in the back, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I'm pretty happy with that. Take this out, and I'll be able to do the gluing. Again, I'm using the 5-minute epoxy. I'll be placing each one of these accordingly. And then there's the issue of, is the 5-minute epoxy, when I take and I place these in there, going to actually glue the head on and make it impossible to be removed? What I'll be doing is taking a little bit of handy wrap, saran wrap, and placing it over the bottom of the head before I fit it on with the 5-minute epoxy already holding in the pins. Now, another thing that I'll be doing is I don't want these pins to be pulled out very easily with the brass channels. So I'm going to put a little bit of a solder ball, making it a little bit larger so that we don't have a straight up and down hole for these rods inside the 5-minute epoxy. And by adding a little bit of width at the very bottom, it's going to be wider, and the 5-minute epoxy will hold the holes in a little bit deeper and at the depth, and they won't pull out the same way that if it was just a straight shot. In addition to that, I'm going to go in with a ball diamond, small ball diamond. I'm going to enlarge the bottom of the hole in both of these drilled holes so that the 5-minute epoxy then will go out into the wider area at the bottom of the hole, and then the 5-minute epoxy will not be easily pulled out, and the brass rods, pins, will not be easily pulled out of the 5-minute epoxy as well. It's just a little safety point. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of removal and replacement of the head onto the base, but I like to do things that will stand the test of time when I create a carving, so that's how I handle that. Once I get these glued in and I know that the head is exactly where I want it to be, I'll be able to bring that last edge of the breast right on up to the pencil line I've drawn, and everything will be flush, and it'll just be a matter of sanding this area completely smooth and clean again, and should be good to go. Okay, as I described in the last segment, I'm going to be putting solder balls on the ends of each one of these brass pins, which will help ensure that the brass pins aren't pulled out of the base when the head is detached from the base. So again, it's important to apply some flux and picking up a little bit of solder and to make sure that the width I'm creating isn't bigger than the actual hole that I have to put this into. That should be good on this one. can see it's enlarged just a bit. That's enough for the 5-minute to hold it steadfast despite being pulled out. Do the second one, same way. So got some solder here. A little bit more solder. There we go. Let that cool down a little bit. Okay, I've mixed up my 5-minute epoxy. I've got my plastic with the holes all cut into it. I've got the pins inserted into the head. And now I'll be using a toothpick to put the 5-minute epoxy right into the holes. And I do want it to be as generous as I can without getting too messy. But as I stated before, I want this 5-minute to expand into the wider area at the bottom of the hole, which will hold the pins in better than if it was just straight holes. So now that I've been able to put this in, this 5-minute in, I'm going to wipe off the excess before I place the plastic on it. Make it much easier when sanding. I'm going to put a little bit more into this one. Again, wiping off the excess on the outside. I'm placing this plastic over the holes because I don't want the glue to attach the head permanently to the base. But it's important that I attach everything and let this 5 minutes set up with the pins inside. When I'm done in 5 minutes, I'll actually give it about 10 minutes, the 5-minute will be set up and I should be able to safely remove the head from the pins, and the pins will then be permanently glued into the base. Okay, my 10 minutes is up, and I'm going to remove the head from the base and that plastic from the base, and then I'll be using I know that the pins are straight and or at least aligned with the channel because I glued them with the head attached, and I'm cleaning up the area around the pins with alcohol. I mentioned earlier that alcohol will cut the excess of 5-minute epoxy while it's still early. And with that all cleaned up, I've completed the pin setting process on both the head and the base, and I've got an excellent fit.